Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is making new friends. More specifically, is it more difficult to make new friends as an adult? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most of you, I'm willing to bet $1 that almost all of you who are listening are adults. But I wanted to share with you this article that I came across on the website vox.com. And it talked about the difficulties that some people are having making new friends as an adult. And it kind of compare and contrast how we made friends earlier in life. And I'll touch on that a little bit later in the episode. But the headline really kind of drew me in because I will say that I'm someone who actually comes from a place of privilege in the fact that I have quite a few friends. In fact, I've got a lot of friends. I think more than anything else, I'm able to differentiate between my associates and friends. And even saying that, for an average person, an average man, I have quite a few friends, people that I really genuinely call friends, that I keep in contact with. And I know that, or at least I figured out as I've gotten older, that I'm probably an anomaly in that aspect. It's a privilege, but I'm still not the person that you would probably look at and say, hey, you want to be like him, because I think it's probably not a lot of people that have as many friends as I have. And I'm not saying that, again, to cast any aspersions on anyone or to brag or to boast, but I feel very fortunate in the sense that I do have a lot of friends, and I do have a lot of friends, close friends from childhood. And I think one of the biggest things that we have to do as adults is, like I said, differentiate between our associates and our friends. Now, for me, it's quite simple. I have associates, I have friends, and then I have crew. And like, you're going to fall somewhere in between there. And the thing I always say about myself, as far as my friends are concerned, is that if you're my friend, you don't have to ask, I wonder if I'm his friend, because it's known, right? It's not a secret. I don't think I have many associates that would say I'm his friend. They'd probably say I'm his associate. But because I draw the line, and one of the things that you can do as a friend is give of yourself and your time. You don't spend a lot of time talking on the phone or sending text messages to people that aren't friends. At least I don't. If I'm talking to you, you're probably a friend. But so I know in reading this article, I don't necessarily fit into what it is that they're trying to convey. Because as an adult, I'm not going to say I'm not interested in making any friends. I just don't know where I have the capacity to fulfill any more friendships, any new friendships along the way. It's not to say that I can't, but I just, I'm in that space where I think I've got enough. But the article talks about how difficult it is for some adults to make friends. And like I said, it caught my attention because it's not really a space that I operate in. I've got some friends, again, that I've got some friends that I've known relatively for a short period of time, and I've got some friends that I've known damn near all of my life. And what's interesting is like how you actually define the word friend. And I remember our oldest son, Dion, he's 25 at the time of this recording, but when he was little, when he was a little kid, he would say, yeah, I was hanging with Chris. That's my friend. And I would be like, no, he's not your friend. Has he ever been over here before? Have we ever met Chris before? How do you know Chris? Oh, Chris is in my class. Well, just because he's in your class and he sits next to you doesn't make him your friend. And what I wanted to do was, because he's such a friendly child, even to this day at 25, he's still friendly. I wanted him to not just assume that because you sit next to someone or you talk to someone every day or whatever, that you're actually friends with them. You know, if you spend time with them, you're sharing secrets, you have common goals and bonds and stuff like that. That's more along the lines of defining what a friendship is. But then I also realized too that even as his father, I could not tell him who his friends were. Time will tell you who your friends are. And that's one of the things that actually kind of does not talk about. They don't really talk about in this particular article. The article talks about, and it gives a stat, and I'll read you the stat. It says, although over 60% of Americans consider themselves as to having close friends, and they consider that being a crucial part of a fulfilling life, only 8% of people 18 and older report having no close friends. Now that's strange when you think about it. So 60% of people think like for you to have a fulfilling life, you have to have close friends. But 8% of people 18 and over say they don't have any close friends. I can't really tell you that I know anybody who doesn't have at least one close friend. I mean, friendships are essential to the soul. I mean, whether or not your friend is your sibling or, you know, somebody that you grew up with or somebody that you met at work or somebody who you just bonded over heartbreak with or what have you. Friendships, I think are important. And I think if you examine the people that you call friends in your lifetime, hopefully they've been around for a while. But we all know some friends come, some friends go. That's just how it goes. The article also says one study found that generally most friends, it found that most people have the majority of their friends at the age of 25. And then after 25, it tends to taper off and you, on average, lose 2 friends a year, roughly, as you move on through life. And that's a gradual decline for friends. But it got me to thinking, like, if you think about it and put yourself into this scenario, how many friends have you really lost over the last 15 to 20 years? It's probably not as many as you think. And maybe, just maybe, some of the people that you thought were your friends that you lost over this period of time really weren't your friends. And like I said, I can only look at myself, and I don't really know that I've lost, I don't know, the amount of friends I can say that I've lost over the last 15 to 20 years. I probably can count them on one hand. I'll be honest. And I feel fortunate in saying that because I understand too that everybody's not like that, especially people who don't really have a lot of friends to begin with. I've lost associates, but I mean, hey, you don't cry over an associate. But friends, you know, that losing a friendship would definitely bother you. So it goes to the question that they posed in the article. Why is it so hard to make new friends as an adult? Before I answer the question, for me, it's not really that hard. I think But I also understand in saying that, one, I'm a man. And I think men, we tend to bond a little quicker and a little easier off certain things, certain commonalities, certain goals, certain habits. Um, and that's just kind of how some of us are wired. I won't say all, because some men are just weird. And some men are just goofy. And some men are weird and goofy and just aren't really good friends. I mean, it is what it is. But to answer the question, why is it so hard to make new friends? The article also talks about how, as kids, we're thrust into situations. So when you're a kid, you're put into a classroom, right? And you got to sit next to little Johnny next to you. And, you look over and Johnny's got on the same type of Air Jordans that you have on. And so you say, hey, nice shoes, Johnny. Johnny says, oh, I like your shoes too. And then Johnny looks at your Trapper Keeper notebook. You open up your Trapper Keeper notebook and you've written the word, I don't know, Atlanta Braves on it. And you've come to find out that little Johnny's an Atlanta Braves fan too. And then you open up the other part of your folder and he sees Superman. And you've got a Superman, and he's got a Superman comic book in his book bag. And you start bonding over commonalities and things that you like. And so when you're kids, you don't necessarily put up those defense mechanisms. You don't necessarily try to hide who you are. You are very, very open as to how you want people to see you. And let's just be honest, as kids, we all wanted to be liked. So that makes it easier to become friends with someone, because almost all of us are, trending toward the same goal as far as wanting to get to know someone. And then if you like someone, you want them to like you back. And that's how you become friends. So as kids, we were put into situations where you had to facilitate together to build a relationship. The article says that research shows that it takes over 200 hours spent with someone to consider them to be a close friend. I didn't really think about it until I read it myself, but yeah, my close friends and my crew, oh, we've spent way more than 200 hours together. But those friendships have been built over lifetimes. So again, for me, and again, this is how I differentiate close friends, crew, those and friends. Like, those are three separate entities in and of itself. And wherever you fall, that's cool. But yeah, you're going to spend time with each other. I mean, I think that's a given. But racking up that much time with people, it gives you a chance to bond, obviously. Whether or not you're in a classroom, on the playground, on the school bus, on the practice field, in the neighborhood, in a dorm room, study group, wherever, it gives you that time to bond with that person. Conversely, as an adult, let's be real. You don't have 200 hours. You don't have 200 hours to spend trying to build with a close friend. You could, but you're talking about probably a couple of years, if we're being honest. Our hours are precious. And, as we get older, we've got different responsibilities, different duties, different things that we have to do as far as relationships. Maybe we have children, we have partners, and then your regular everyday hobbies. So you have to divide your time. And honestly, there's only 24 hours in a day. So one of the questions I have is, do you lose friends after settling down and getting in a serious relationship or getting married? I've seen a lot of people lose friends once they've gotten into relationships. It's unfortunate, but it happens. And I don't necessarily know that it's something that people are always conscious of. Sometimes it just generally happens because now all of a sudden, if you're in this new relationship, you're going to spend more time with that person than you will with your friends. And your friends have to understand that. And sometimes if you find somebody and your friend doesn't have somebody, it could be a problem. It shouldn't be, but that's not how things work. That's not the way the world works. I will say this, and I'll use myself as an example. I did I did lose. I don't want to say lose, but I guess I lost. Well, I did. Here's the thing. I had probably more than the average man would have as far as female friends, particularly when I was in college. As many of you know, or maybe you don't know, I went to South Carolina State University where I graduated. It's a historically Black college and university located in the Garden City of Orangeburg, South Carolina. I had a lot of female friends at South Carolina State. And as many of you know, I met my future wife at South Carolina State University. But here's the thing, like even my female friends who knew my girlfriend at the time and then subsequently my wife, and they were cool with her. But like once we moved in together and then once we settled down, the phone calls kind of stopped. And I don't really know why. And it wasn't like it was on some disrespect because they were cool with her. But it's just, even at that young age, I didn't understand. I was like I remember asking like my homegirl, Nicole, shout out Nicole. I was like, I remember calling her one day. I was like, yo, man, you don't call me no more. What's up? And she was like, oh, you got your girl, you in your relationship. I don't want to bother you. And I'm like, we've been rolling since freshman year. Why? It ain't ever been a bother before. What's the problem now? And she just explained like, she's giving our friendship some space and giving me a chance to bond in this new relationship that I have. And I didn't understand it at the time, but looking back on it now, it probably made a lot of sense. Again, shout out to Nicole. And we don't talk, even now we don't talk. We chop it up on Facebook every once in a blue moon. But I mean, ain't no love lost. She's still my dog, but it's just one of those friendships that kind of faded, I guess. And there's no interest or no love interest or anything like that. Don't get it twisted. I mean, this is like one of my best friends from college, but we just kind of faded. And I guess that happens, when you allow people to have their other relationships or their significant others come into the picture, then, maybe some of your close friends do take a step back. Obviously, the older that we get, the more we're fixed into our schedules, our relationships, and the things that we acquire along the way. We get partners, we get husband and wives, spouses, whatever you want to call it, in-laws, our longtime friends and children come along with that. And that all of those entities can take up a lot of your time, and they will take up a lot of your time. And so maybe you just don't have the time to foster those friendships that you once had. And that's a part of being an adult. But you also have to understand too, like there has to be a line that you make for yourself. And you can't allow others to make that line for yourself. And generally speaking, what happens, or at least what I see happens, and I'll be honest, it happened to me to some degree. As you get older, you generally start drifting towards people who are, doing kind of the same things that you were doing. So if you're married and you have kids, you're probably going to start hanging with other people who are married and have young kids, especially if they're kids around your age. And I don't necessarily know why, but it just kind of happens. But those people are adjacent to your life, and sometimes they're not even people who you would necessarily hang out with. I remember back when I was single, when my wife and I were just dating. And I just remember like there would be nothing for me to have like a card party at the crib, and we just have folks just come over and you play cards, spades, and you just talking trash, and there's some food and drinks, and that's just, and it's kicking it. But as you transition and you have kids, and it's not to say that you don't do that, but you're probably going to do that with people who are, kind of like on the same time that you want. And that's not to say that I don't have single friends, because trust me, I have single friends, male and female, more male than female, but my single friends are cooler than a fan, and my wife loves them. But I do know people who have gotten married and, kind of cut the single friends off, because the single friends a little wild. And, for whatever reason, but that's a subject for a whole nother day. But it's even in that, like, I'll give you another example. Like, we're a part of a, how should I say, social organization. And I'm cool with the social organization. I was, a little bit apprehensive about getting down with it initially, and as a family, but it's been cool. And I don't mind doing some of the activities that they do in this group. However, it cannot interfere with the stuff that I like to do, which for me, case in point, if it's football season, my Saturdays and Sundays are very precious, because I'd like to spend my Saturdays and Sundays sitting in front of a TV watching football, doing nothing else. And my family totally respects that, and they give me my space. And so I don't like it when the social organizations say, hey, we have a meeting, or hey, we're going to do this activity on Sunday. Don't plan an activity on a Sunday afternoon in October if you want me to be there, because that's not going to happen, because I'm going to be sitting in front of the TV with my remote, changing the channels, watching the games. But it's cool. But even things like that, it helps, build the friendships that you may or may not be seeking at as an adult. So that's something else to keep in mind. Joining social organizations sometimes can help you as an adult, make more friends. But I tell you what, it is time to pay some bills. So let's take a quick commercial break. And on the other side, I'll give you more of how you can develop friendships as an adult. Sit tight. We'll be back in just a second. Are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul Podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast and enjoy the vibes. And just like that, we are back. Once again, it's your boy 12 Kyle. This is the 12 Kyle Podcast, and we are talking about, making new friends as an adult. One of the things the article that I mentioned talked about is, it asked the question of what is preventing us from forming connections. That's an interesting question, because I think when you form a connection, obviously there has to be some type of commonality there. Some people, let's just be honest, are socially awkward in forming connections. Striking up conversations sometimes can be hard for people. Not for me, because here's the thing. I was told this a long time ago, and I think it's true. If you want to get to know somebody, ask them about the subject that they know the most, themselves. You can't get people to talk about a lot of different things, but the one thing that you can get any and everybody to talk about is themselves. Most people will answer questions that you ask about them, as long as they're not, too intrusive or anything like that. But for the most part, people will answer questions. personally, I'm an open book. So if you ask me a question about me, I mean, I know me more than anybody else. So of course, I'm the subject matter expert on me. Um, I'm more willing to talk about me than I am to talk about politics or religion or anything like that. And most people are, and I'm just using those two as an example. I would not, I would not suggest that you try to talk about politics and religion in trying to make friends with people. But fundamentally, a lot of people are burned out by life. Social media has a tendency to kind of wear us down if you allow it to, and so there are a lot of people, maybe not so much as my age, but the generation behind me, who are a little awkward, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, when they pour into their lives and their work, they really don't have a lot left in the tank when it comes to spending time with friends, trying to make new friends, or trying to connect with people. It can be exhausting. But here's the thing I will say. Don't make trying to make a connection with people a chore. If it's a chore or if it feels like a chore, it's something that you will regret. And ultimately, it's not going to work out because you're going to be resentful of that person, either directly or indirectly, because based off of what you did to establish that connection. Particularly if it gets to a point where you feel like you're pouring more into the connection or the friendship than they are. It's a problem. So, that's why, sometimes you ever hear your friends or people that you know, or even maybe something you see on social media, people make plans and then the plans get canceled and people are relieved that the plans got canceled because they really didn't want to go to begin with. Now for me, I've gotten very good at this because if I don't want to go somewhere, I don't go. And I get invited to a lot of stuff and the answer is usually no. And I'm cool with saying no. I don't have FOMO. I don't fear that I'm going to miss anything. I'm not going to miss the party of the year. I'm not going to miss the club because, the club is the club. I ain't been in clubs like that in years. I've had my run in clubs. So if you tell me something's going on at a club, I'm definitely not going. I don't care where it is. But I will say this much, though. I've gotten to a point where saying no is cool for me because I know that I only have a certain amount of time to devote to certain things. And I think my wife has gotten better at understanding her husband and understanding that, hey, let me run this by him before I say, hey, we're coming to this party. Because here's the thing. If we get invited to a social set, we get invited to a set. It's going to be food, it's going to be, people there. My thing is always, who's going to be there? Who all's going to be there? And the reason why I say that is because if you have, generally speaking, if you have women who are organizing these events, there's going to be other women there, which I'm cool with. But it's got to be some dudes there too, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be the only guy at a house set with a bunch of women. That ain't cool. And that's not happening. It hasn't happened, but it's because I vet the situations. But ultimately, you have to be intentional about it. You have to make an effort. You really have to make an effort, and you have to be intentional about how you make your connections with your friends and how you maintain those connections. I mentioned at the top of the podcast that I do have quite a bit of friends. And again, it's not a flex. It's just being honest. I'm pretty much a friendly type person and I'm very loyal. And I managed to keep the friends that I've had for a relatively long time. Like my crew, most of my crew I've known since like middle school and high school. And then I've got a few like my boy Jay Fresh. I've literally been friends with this dude since we were 6 years old. Dr. Jamel, I've literally known her since like I was 7 and she was 6. So it's not, I understand now in life that most people don't have friends like that where they can go back that far. And I feel privileged to have that. And my friends are still here. And, I cherish that. And I cherish those friendships, and I cherish the experiences that we have anytime we get together because it's a good time. But you have to be intentional about how you stay in contact with your friends. I mentioned Jay Fresh. Jay Fresh lives in LA. Jay Fresh and I have not lived in the same city since 1998, I think. When he lived in the city of Atlanta. But we talk every day. If we don't talk, we'll text. Oh, well, let me rephrase it. We text every day. We'll talk at least twice a week. But we're in constant communication because that friendship is important, that we got to talk, even if we don't talk long. It might be 30 minutes. And then one time we may talk maybe 2 hours. It just depends. Even with the time difference. So you have to be intentional about those relationships and friendships as to how you're going to maintain them. And it can be a lot, but here's the thing. I think it's a lot easier to maintain friendships now than it's ever been before. Case in point, when I went away to college to South Carolina State University, there was no internet. The internet had not been invented. By the time I left, there was circulating this new thing that was called electronic mail. And I graduated in 1996, right? So I had to stay in contact with my friends via either the telephone or writing letters. Novel concept, right? So, I think nowadays it's way easier to stay in touch with those who you care about, people that, you call friends. But you have to be intentional. You have to say, okay, well, hey, I'm going to pick up the phone. Now, it can't be a one-way street. And I think that's where a lot of adults get it twisted. You can't be the one pouring into the friendship and the other person isn't trying. I mean, it doesn't matter how many friends you have. Nobody's going to waste their time or their efforts on a friendship where it's a one-way street. You're crazy if you do that. That doesn't make any sense. It never has, and it never will. So the article concludes by asking, how can we make more friends? Definitely, one of the things that they suggested was act like kids again. There's something to be said for being able to be in the same room with your friend or be on the phone with your friend and laugh. Laughter is good for the soul. My friends and I, we laugh a lot. We laugh at each other. We joke each other. We have inside jokes. But I think that's important. And the reason why is because that brings out some of what I just mentioned earlier. The kid in you. We all have an inner child. It's very important that we nurture that child, that we give that child an opportunity to come out as much as we can. Because here's the thing, we are getting older. We're getting a little grayer, some of us. And time is moving on. Time waits for none of us. You got to have a respect for time. You hear me say that all the time. But in saying that, acting like kids is about really just recapturing what it is that you did or the things that you saw in a person that helped establish the friendship from the beginning. About a month and a half ago, I got a chance to meet up for breakfast with my boy Sean. I mentioned it on a previous podcast. Sean and I have known each other since like the second grade. And we don't talk every day. Hell, we probably tweet more than we probably tweet each other more than we actually talk or text. But that's my guy. And, we were in us talking and meeting up for breakfast. We had brunch and we were able to just laugh and talk about and catch up and laugh and talk about old times and bring up old memories and stuff like that. And I think those things are good. But it just really reiterated about the idea of childhood. Now, granted, everybody doesn't have the same background that I have. So I understand that if you become friends with, if you're 35 and you become friends with someone and you've been friends with them for 5 years, you don't have, 200 hours of a friendship. I get that part of it. The flip side of it is that you have to be very intentional about maintaining that. It's just like, watering the grass. You got to water your grass. You have to nurture it. If you have free time, use that time to call that friend or shoot a text or jump in a group chat, send a meme. Those things I think go a long way because ultimately those are some of the things that tie you together, the bond that you have. Ultimately, you got to be you. I say that all the time. I can only be Kyle. I'm not good at being anybody else. I don't want to be anybody else. I've done a pretty good job of being Kyle up until this point. So at this point in my life, really doesn't make a lot of sense to be anybody else. In fact, I think I probably fail miserably if I tried. But just be intentional. You have to make the effort. So, ultimately, in conclusion, the question was, is making friends as an adult very hard? It is, but it isn't. It's really as hard as you make it to be. You have to be intentional about your feelings. You have to be intentional about your desires. You have to be intentional about what it is that you want from this other person that you call a friend. It's no different from any relationship. In fact, some of the same principles apply to your romantic relationships. You have to be intentional with those. Why can't you be intentional? If you're going to be intentional in your romantic relationships, why not be intentional in your personal friendships? Most of everything that I said goes with both. Be you and be intentional. It's really not hard to make friends. It's probably as easy as you remember it being when you were a kid. The only difference is we've allowed other things and other people to kind of get in the way, and that's cool. But when other things get in the way, make sure that you do what you can to maintain and nurture those friendships, and they'll last. They've done to this point. They're not about to stop doing it now. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. You can find this podcast on all podcast readers. Wherever you get free podcasts, that's where you can find us. Also, share the podcast. We love it when you share. It helps the podcast grow. Now, if you're on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube. Go to YouTube, 12 Kyle Podcast. We're there. All of the episodes are there. Now, the great thing about our YouTube channel is that we have both audio and video of all of the episodes. Share, hit the notification button. That way you can get notified when a new episode drops. Again, we're on social media as well. You can follow me, 12 Kyle, 12 KYLE on all social media platforms, as well as 12 Kyle Podcast on all social media platforms. That goes for, Twitter X, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok as well. We got a TikTok page. If you'd like to continue this discussion, we have a Reddit page, Reddit.com/12 Kyle Podcast. And last but not least, if you would like to make a financial contribution to the podcast, please do so. Look in the description box. There's a link that says merch. You can get 12 Kyle Podcast merch. That's t-shirts, hoodies, posters, as well as coffee mugs like the one that I'm pointing to right here at my desk. You can also hit us up on Cash App, $TWELVEKYLE. And last but not least, we have a new baby. We have a new baby. Not a real baby, but we have a new baby. It's called the Rap Soul Podcast. It is the intersection of music from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. It's what we say where hip hop, R&B, rap, and soul music meet. And those episodes drop every Monday at midnight. The 12 Kyle podcast drops every Thursday and every Sunday at midnight. The great thing about the Rap Soul podcast, you can find it wherever you find this podcast. So go over there and subscribe as well. And if you're a music lover, definitely take a listen and share it with a friend. We definitely appreciate it. Again, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.